Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the process of transitioning from doing any sort of volume work or accumulation work into max effort training, which is something I've done multiple times since starting YouTube, and you guys have watched my process a little bit. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skill at my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And this is a process I had to go through again recently, because you guys remember I stopped doing all chest presses and all squatting for a couple of years. It's just kind of funny because people always say, oh, Jason, you only care about the big three. And it's like, I didn't bench or squat for 2 years. I did a lot of deadlifting, a lot of overhead pressing, a lot of weighted chin-ups, rows, but all sorts of overhead pressing. I did 3 or 4 different variations of the overhead press, a lot of cleaning it into place. Again, lots of deadlifting though. But I needed to relearn these exercises. So if you guys recall, I started doing high volumes of triples, and I started doing that on everything. And generally, I like that. For people who are no longer novice lifters, I think anytime you reintroduce a new exercise, I think the best way to build up both your strength base and your work capacity on that exercise while honing technique is to do things like that. I'm a big fan of accumulation work with triples. I know some people like to do it with fives, but I feel that it gives you the best balance because you get more first reps in, which is something the Westside system realized a long time ago with their speed work. If you want to get better in the long term at doing maxes, you need a lot of first reps. In other words, you need a lot of sets. And the best way to get a lot of sets is to keep the reps low and do a lot of volume. Now, the interesting thing I always found amusing because I filmed so much of that accumulation work that it does amuse me a bit, because a lot of people are like, oh man, you're not as strong as I thought you'd be, because they're used to seeing a lot of guys who do max effort work only filming their peak sets, and they're thinking those were peak sets, and they're not realizing I did 10 sets with that weight. It's not going to be my 3-rep max. Not going to be even that close to a 3-rep max, because you can't do 10 sets of anything with a max. Right? You can't do 10 sets of 3 with a 3-rep max, just like you can't do 10 singles with your true 1-rep max. You're going to fail the second one. You're only going to be able to do one set with a max effort. That's real world. So I'm a big fan of that. Now for novice lifters, I always say 5s, and I agree with people like Ripto on that. I don't like to see novice lifters really doing 1 to 3 reps. They really don't. So 5s works better for them for building things up. But anytime you introduce a new lift that you haven't done in a long time, meaning you haven't done a given exercise or anything remotely close to it for about 6 months, I think that you need to base build on that lift, because you will get a lot of practice setting up. You will get practice with first reps. You will learn the bar path. You'll learn the biomechanics. And I think things like 10 sets of 3 is a fantastic way to master technique on an exercise. It will give you a large amount of volume. We know that 10 sets of 3 on a big lift can stimulate maximum hypertrophy. Anyone who's looked at the research is aware of that. You can stimulate maximum muscle growth. You can improve work capacity. You can get a lot of practice handling sub-maximal weights. And if you're going to go into any sort of max effort training, your technique needs to be fairly dialed in. And that's an important consideration. Your technique needs to be dialed in. In other words, if you don't have good form on an exercise because you've done a lot of volume learning the technique, you have no business maxing out. And I don't care whether it's a 1-rep max or a 5-rep max. You have no business doing it. You need to ingrain technique, safe bar pass, all of that stuff. And doing very high volumes of triples is one of the best ways, if not the best way to do that. We could argue about the best. I believe that it is. And I like to call that lift mastery. And it's something I've discussed in the past. And I ran through a phase of a couple of months of lift mastery for 4 or 5 exercises. Right? And that's what I did. Mastered those lifts again. Then, what I like, before people go into any sort of true max effort training, I'm a big fan of concurrent style periodization. Which is again what I did for a couple of months, because now I've eased into full max effort work every day. I'm running a full max effort system, the most extreme variation, which would be Bulgarian style training. And my strength is skyrocketing, by the way, but here's the thing. I can attribute that to that phase of lift mastery. Yeah, I had to come in and handle piddly weights. I had to work with 175 for strict presses to get 10 sets in. And that's okay, because I readjusted. I wanted to learn a new variation of the exercise, a new way to strict press, a different bar path, different hand positions. I wanted to find my best leverages things that wouldn't cause me any sort of strain in my lower back and all these different things. I felt I needed to master that lift again and find how my body prefers me to do that lift now that I'm older. So I went through a phase with that. I went through a phase with my benching. I went through a phase with my floor presses. Phase with squats, because I had to start squatting again. So I started with front squats, then switched over to back squats. Accumulation work. Then ease into a concurrent style training. Why? So that you can start practicing using heavier weights. Because when you're doing high volumes of triples, yes, it's a heavier weight than you're going to do sets of 8 to 10 with. But it's not going to be 3 rep maxes. It's not going to be that heavy. It's still volume work ultimately. It's just spaced out in a way that allows you to get the best compensatory acceleration, the best bar speed, so that you can stay strong, stay explosive, and get a lot of first reps in. So you practice setting up, you practice walking your squats out, you practice unracking a bar so that you get your setups perfect, and you learn how to not bleed energy when you're setting things up and how to get tight over and over and over. Because every exercise needs to be done tight. Anything you want to be strong and explosive on, you have to learn how to set up tight. And how to do it correctly, and it's practice for that. By easing into a concurrent training, you can continue to practice that. So in other words, on any given lift at different points through the month, depending on how many days a week you're doing that lift, you're probably going to have a heavy day and a volume day again, to where you can continue to master the lift and practice all those setups, and then you have one day where you go really heavy for obviously a lot less volume. This is a way to transition into max effort training. Now, if you follow West Side type systems, that's how they run it year round. That's how they run it year round. But I would say for anyone, you should probably do a lift mastery phase on an exercise and then a concurrent training phase before you go into what I would consider any sort of true max effort work like the Bulgarian system. And the thing is, it worked very, very well for me. I'm very happy with the way my lifts are progressing because I did all of that. I quit squatting completely, guys. I had to start with 315 again. Considering you guys have seen me squat 508 raw on camera, raw, no wraps, no sleeves. I've done that in the past on YouTube. 2 years of no squatting, I lost an enormous amount of strength. Enormous amount of strength. And I'm not going to be happy with 500 again. I'm going to go for 600, and I've already said that. But I had to start back with 315, and I had to do 10 sets of 3 with 315, 10 sets 3 with 325, 10 sets 3 with 345, 355, and I had to build it up. Then I eased into concurrent training with it. Now I'm up doing pause work sets with like 430. I've only been doing true max effort work a couple of weeks now. And I'm probably going to be able to add 5 pounds to my sets every week for a little while. It seems to be going that direction. At least until I can get up to 500. I'm hoping to get close to 500 again before it slows too much, but we'll see how it goes. But by doing a phase of lift mastery, I had to relearn how to squat again. And I think that's important, that you master a lift before you start doing max effort work. And then the same thing, I eased into having a heavier day, and I didn't start that heavy, guys. My first max effort day, I put 390 on the bar because I was still doing high volume at 365. And let's keep in mind, this was like 10 weeks ago. So I had to go from that of doing 390 for a heavy day, and then alternating it and doing micro-loading and trying to add 2.5 pounds a week. Rebuilding the base. And then once I had reestablished some hypertrophy in those areas, learned the bar pass, now I'm able to go progressively heavier and focus on one heavy all-out peak set in a workout. And it's going pretty well. I haven't hit an RPE 10 yet, and I'm able to just continually progress because I'm doing max effort work 5 to 6 days a week right now. It's an everyday thing for me on multiple exercises. I do max effort on 3 different lifts every day. But I had to get to that point to where I can do that safely. You need to go through a phase of lift mastery and then some sort of concurrent training at the bare minimum. And even if you're going to stay with concurrent training, I think you need those transitions if you're going to go into max effort work. And like I said, it's paying off enormously because my lifts are skyrocketing. Everything is going up now because I took the time to remaster the lifts, rebuild my base, develop some hypertrophy and skill on those lifts again. Now that I'm actually going really heavy, I'm setting PR after PR after PR after PR. Most of my lifts are having at least one PR every week, if not two. All my big lifts. And it's because I took the time to redo a lift mastery phase with some lighter weight and ingrained motor patterns and learn technique and learn to do these lifts safely again. And I think that's absolutely essential because max effort work really has no room for not learning the lift correctly. In other words, you don't want to have only practiced a lift for 2 weeks and then jump in to start doing any sort of maxes, whether it's a 1, 3, or a 5 rep max. Real bad idea. So that's usually what I recommend. I recommend a lift mastery phase at least 3 to 6 weeks. At least 3 to 6 weeks. And even then, no less than 3 weeks. And if you're going to do 3 weeks, you need to ease into concurrent training, and even your max efforts probably don't need to be above 9 out of 10 on the RPE scale. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. And by the way, for those who aren't aware, I started a Patreon a few days ago. For people who don't know why I started it, I answered that in this week's Q&A, so go watch those. My Patreon is in my About tab, so check that out if you guys want to see unique content that I don't cover here on YouTube. And I'm out.